Good morning. Good afternoon, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Council President, members of Council. It's nice to be here again. Normally, I would dispense with the testimony, but I'd like to read a brief summary because we did have a lot of changes this past year, and just kind of give the board a summary, the Council summary. To my left is CIO Christopher DeFusco. My name is Francis Bielli, Executive Director. To my right is Deputy Executive Director Shamika Talaferro, and our executive staff behind us, and the Finance Director, of course, Mr. DeBow. So the plan's funding percentage increased from 45.3% to 46.8% as of July 1st, 2018. That's a 1.5% increase. Important factors contributing to the increased funding percentage are the recent changes and the decision to dedicate the additional funds to paying down the unfunded actuarial liability, resulting in slashing the UAL by 2.1% in fiscal year 19. As part of the strategy to strengthen the fund, any additional pension contributions resulting from the last round of collective bargaining negotiations, along with the proceeds the pension fund receives from the sales tax, are held in a separate notional account as part of the adopted revenue recognition policy. The funds in the RRP notional account are dedicated or mandated to paying down the unfunded actuarial liability. The annual city pension contribution is now based on the higher RRP, not the lower minimum municipal obligation mandated by state law. Accordingly, the dedicated stream of RRP money will result in a continued accelerated paydown of the UAL. It should also be noted that approximately 81% of that unfunded liability is from Plan 67, a plan which no new employee has entered since 1987 for exempts and non-reps, 1988 for police and fire, and 1992 for DC 33 and 47. As the RRP continues to pay down the UAL at an accelerated pace, the effect of the Plan 67 legacy liability should continue to decrease. The improvements to the fund also resulted in a positive annual cash flow for the fund for the first time in my memory. The gradual and continued reduction of the assumed rate of return, the adoption of the revenue recognition policy, and other responsible steps explored and adopted by all parts of our government interested in the health of the fund reduces the fund's risk profile and will continue to benefit the members of the fund and the taxpayers. The desire to adopt strategies to further strengthen the fund among the board, city administration, municipal unions, and city council resulted in the adoption and formalization of a plan for new non-uniform municipal employees. Plan 16 is a hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution plan. An employee in Plan 16 receives the traditional Plan Y defined pension benefit up to $65,000 in annual pensionable earnings, with the opportunity to make additional contributions for earnings above $65,000 into a 457 plan, including a partial city match. While new uniformed employees are not members of Plan 16, new employees pay an additional 2.5% towards their base pension contribution, while existing uniformed employees pay an additional 1.84% to their baseline rate. All employees, including uniformed employees, are required to make additional employee pension contributions as part of the new tiered contribution tables. Tiered contributions require employees to make contributions above their base contribution rate based on a sliding salary scale. The additional contribution sliding scale begins for those making $45,001 at 0.5% and culminates at 2.75% for those making above $100,000. Additional tiered contributions for those in Plan 16 are capped at 1.5%, which is the rate associated with their $65,000 defined benefit cap. The board voted again to reduce the assumed rate of return to 7.660 for the current fiscal year and 7.55% for the following fiscal year. The board has reduced the assumed rate of return for 10 consecutive years, a total of 120 basis points, or 1.20% over the past 11 years. Per the board's actuary, while the funding ratio may appear to reflect lack of progress in funding, the decrease in the assumed rate of return represents improvement of the fund's risk profile, improving the likelihood of achieving the assumed rate in the future. Based on the most recent actuarial analysis, the fund is projected to reach 80% funding by 2029, 1 full year ahead of previous actuarial projections, and 100% funding by 2033. The fund's investment return for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018 was 9.01% net of fees. You may also recall that the fund's portfolio was restructured in fiscal 2016 to divest from all but one hedge fund and other underperforming high-cost investment products. Accordingly, there has been a drastic reduction in investment fees paid by the board from $33.5 million, which is a ratio of 0.69 in fiscal year 14, to $15.7 million, an investment ratio of 0.31 in FY18, an overall 55.1% reduction during that time frame. The board and the staff continues to monitor fees and ensure the fund is operating efficiently in a cost-effective manner. Passively managed investments now account for approximately 52% of the fund's assets, up from roughly 29% just 4 years ago. Using our investment manager database, the board once again conducted a utilization study to determine the universe of diverse investment managers that meet the fund's criteria, which is having a 3-year track record and at least $100 million in assets under management. The results are that 9.5% of firms and 5.2% of their products had greater than 50% minority or women ownership. Through February 29, 2019, the fund's current lineup of investment managers includes 22.10% diversity managers, far surpassing the universe that the utilization study revealed. Diverse plus local managers are approximately 30% of the fund. The board continues to seek high-quality, diverse, local, and emerging managers for allocations across all asset classes. Board members and staff continue to participate in the Middle Atlantic Plan Sponsor, the National Association of Security Professionals, and other nonprofit organizations that are proponents of diversity in the investment professional ranks. The board is an active member of an association called the 30% Coalition, which is an organization committed to the goal of increasing women participation on corporate boards. The board supports proxy initiatives promoting issues such as inclusive corporate boards, equal pay, and other important social issues. The board also encourages our investment managers to create and/or expand diversity outreach through internships, mentoring, and hiring programs. The board is seeing real results by investment firms in this area as a result of our efforts. Our investment staff participates in local financial education program for high school students called Invest in Girls, and another school-based financial education program called Operation Hope. The mission of Operation Hope is to expand economic opportunity in underserved communities through financial literacy, dignity, and empowerment. Topics include basics of budgeting, banking, fundamentals of credit, and introduction to savings and investment. By all accounts, the program is very successful and well received. As a staff, we also periodically are asked to be panel members or guest lecturers at various industry education conferences and at local colleges, including graduate classes at Temple University and the University of Pennsylvania. The board is the recipient of a Certificate of Transparency from the National Conference of Public Employees Retirement Systems in furtherance of our level of public disclosure. A large percentage of our employees continue to use the deferred compensation program to enhance their retirement savings. There are currently 23,281 employees participating in the 457 plan administered by Nationwide. Starting this month, actually starting yesterday, Employees have greater flexibility in bolstering their retirement savings by participating in a Roth 457, which allows after-tax contributions to the 457 plan.
Excuse me, Mr. Bielli, are you reading something other than the testimony that's
Yes.
provided to us?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, that's why I wanted to read it, so you'd have it in addition to the testimony.
all right. Was there a reason
So-
you just didn't give it to us?
These were all just recent additions, so I'll be glad to send it to you.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
all right. Can you just give us,
Yeah, so
give
we
us a
just got
copy?
the actuarial report, the draft last week, and the Roth 457 just went through last week. So these are all new additions. And I'll be glad to send you electronic copies.
Yeah, can you just give us a copy,
Yes.
and we can summarize, so we can get to questions?
And the last thing, so the Roth 457, people can participate after tax money to the 457 plan. So it's not tax deferred. They can get it tax-free when they draw it out of retirement. In addition, people can set a percentage
Okay.
for that. So whenever they get a raise, it automatically goes up to that percentage for their deferred compensation.
No. Okay, no, we appreciate the additional,
Yeah, a lot of changes
hopefully,
this year.
yeah, in the future, you can get it to us beforehand, so we can formulate our questions based on
I'm glad to
this
hand
wealth
this
of
up right now. You
knowledge
can have
as
this.
relates to your testimony.
Sure.
Thank you so much, we appreciate you.
You got it.
Thank you.
No, you can have it.
We got a couple of questions, kind of three-parter. So this fiscal year, seems like good news, we're projecting to be a net cash flow positive, which means, I'm assuming it means money coming in is equivalent to money going out in layperson's terms. And earnings will, and additional revenue will be based on earnings, so that's obviously a good thing. And if you can talk about that as it relates to our unfunded pension liability, how exactly that plays into that. Part of that question is if you can tell me how the trajectory of our fund compares to comparable pension plans in comparable cities, municipalities, and also how have the changes to the pensions investment strategy helped with long-term stability? Because we'd like to hear some good news if you can give that to us.
Okay, and I think compared to other public pension funds, I don't have their projections. I wouldn't have that.
Pull the mic down a little bit.
I wouldn't have their projections, so I wouldn't know what their projections are. However, I can tell you that for a couple periods of time, for example, for the past year, we outperformed CSRS, Bucks County, Chester County, Delaware County, and Montgomery County.
Okay.
If you want to go out to a further 5-year period, go out to 10 years, we outperform CSRS, PSRS, and other public pension funds. So our returns have been good compared to other public pension funds.
Sure.
Concerning the projections, the positive cash flow is a result of that dedicated stream of money for the additional contributions, the sales tax, and the tiered contributions being mandated to pay down that unfunded actuarial liability. You may remember that during the proposed sale of PGW and during other proposals, buyouts of pensions, so on and so forth, the idea behind the proposals was to get a lump sum of money to try to pay down the unfunded actuarial liability. The idea of the revenue recognition policy was formalized, except for DC 33, was formalized into all of the collective bargaining agreements. So that's not a policy mandate that can go away very easily now.
Right.
It's subject to collective bargaining. And I think the unions and the city and city council are all happy with that because paying down 2.1% of the unfunded actuarial liability in this past fiscal year, remember, only included DC 33 fully and police under the new contract. Next fiscal year, it will include exempts, non-reps, DC 47, and fire department employees. So the compounding or exponential effect will be that much more dramatic as paying down the unfunded actuarial liability. So the work that the unions and council administration did in order to effectuate that change will have a very good
Actually
positive
working.
effect. As far as the cash flow,
Real quick, on the sales tax, you mentioned that. I know there was some controversy around the sales tax. I know my good friend and colleague, locally now, but formerly up in the state, when there was the issue about the sales tax, and we had anticipated being able to have all that sales tax revenue going to pensions to pay down the unfunded liability much quicker. And the formula that was worked out was to save schools, and we obviously had to do that, but a little disappointed. But the contribution from the sales tax is increasing as projected.
It is increasing,
in the original plan.
and we do have the actuary. Again, this is a draft report, so we should get in the final one soon.
Okay.
Does have projections going out to 2038, and that will be in the actuarial report when it's finalized. So they are projected to increase going forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And by the way, we do appreciate the council president's efforts on that behalf, as I tell Mr. Stitt all the time, on behalf of the pension fund and Councilwoman Parker for that sales tax.
It's a collective effort by all of us and our employees for agreeing to a more robust contribution to a plan, and municipal workers were really, really great. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
The negative
You had
cash
one
flow,
last
that's
thing.
okay. As far as the negative cash flow, and again, this will be in the actuarial report, this was in the draft report. The cash flow has been negative for, ever since I can remember. It's never been positive, but the last 3 years, 4 years, it's been trending upwards because of the additional contributions being made by the city, because of the collective bargaining changes that were made. We were a mature pension plan long before many other pension plans were, and we made changes to adapt to that. Some other pension plans may not have made that changes. So what we're seeing is an evening out of us and other pension plans, and I think we are seeing a more positive cash flow. We are seeing more stability in our pension plan and other pension plans. For example, if you look at some comparable cities and the total contribution ratio to benefits, ours is the highest of any of these cities I'll give you. Ours is at 95%. And I wish I brought my glasses, so it's tough to read, but I'm going to have Chris assist me. So Baltimore is at 65%, Chicago 66%, 50% for Houston, and 68% for Pittsburgh. So what that means is that our fund is very stable. We are almost a pay-as-you-go sort of system, which means if we have a down investment year, it won't be as big of a hit on the general fund as some of these other comparable cities that aren't contributing as high a percentage.
Right.
In fact, you may or may not see a report coming out in the next month or so by Pew applauding the stability of our pension fund in a study that they're doing. So
Okay.
I think we're seeing a lot of positive things happening with the pension fund and the culmination of efforts over the last 4 to 5 years.
All right, that's good news. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you. And Mr. President, out of anybody in this room, only you really know heartfelt when this pension board comes before us and we hear about their recent successes that we know have been sort of growing and compounding over the years because of their sound management. You know why I smile, because we made some very tough decisions under your leadership here as president of this council and during my tenure in Harrisburg as chair of the Philadelphia delegation. And I just want you, Fran, and your entire team to know that when Philadelphia gets it wrong, when we get it wrong, it is highlighted in every newspaper. It's on every news station. Everyone, everywhere highlights what happens when Philadelphia gets it wrong. But when you are able to sit there and for the record note that our pension fund here in our city of Philadelphia has outperformed CSRS and PSERS in Montgomery County and many of the regions surrounding us, and I don't ever remember reading maybe but one article or one line about that. Tell me, if you will, and I'm going back to some questions from last year, I want you to know that we are proud that you outperformed them. But when you think about why, what do you attribute it to relative to your management? Is it the continued reduction in the assumed rate of return? Is it because we've gotten out of some of those more expensive investments, and away from hedge funds? I don't know. Tell us, what do you think is the secret to our sauce? How are we outperforming these others?
Yeah, and I'll let Chris DeFusco also answer some of the specifics of that. But yes, it's all of those things. But getting out of the high-cost, low-performing investments was a key turning point for us. We did that back in 2016 when Michael Donatucci came to the fund and he helped redo our asset allocation along with our consultants. We did that, and we've kept that plan in place. Chris has kept that plan in place. The board has kept that plan in place. And what it did was not make us an outlier. Prior to that, we operated, I would say, more as an endowment as opposed to a public pension fund. And the high fee investments that we were in not only weren't returning well, but they were costing us a lot of money. So reducing our fees by over 55% was key. But also, the equity markets clearly have helped. I mean, the equity markets have done very well, and our fixed income has done well for us also. So yes, I think it's been a combination of the lower fees, more judicious investment decisions, part of those lower fees going to more passive investment at the percentage of 52% at this point versus the percent previously.
You'd say a 52% passive manage.
That's correct.
Okay, so that means it's going down. We were at 57%. Well, we had 7% last year.
Yes, it's slightly lower than last year. Part of that also is because our active managers have outperformed very well, so that percentage goes up. It's not necessarily because we have chosen more active managers to hire versus the passive managers.
Tell me, if you will, how many, because although we're doing well, we've outperformed PSERS and SERS and a lot of the regions in our area, but we still have that $6 billion of unfunded liability. Tell me what the actual number is now and walk through it, if you will, because it is so frustrating when I hear people talk about our unfunded liability and they don't know the other half of the story, Mr. President. And I think you summarized it well. I just want you to walk back through it for the record, that it's attributed to legacy costs associated with 67, and who's still in 67?
Yeah, so the unfunded 81% of that unfunded actuarial liability is due to people who have not been in those plans from 1992 backwards to 1987. On a positive note, many of the recipients of those pensions are still living, right? So that's a good thing. However, it's not good for the pension fund, right? For the pension fund, the longer people live, and that's also part of our funding percentage. We increase the mortality rate. We update that every 3 years at a minimum when the experience study comes out. So as people are living longer, that assumption changes. So that has an impact on the funding percentage, just like reducing the assumed rate of return does. But yes, there's approximately, I'm going to say, 1,500 to 1,700 active employees that are still in Plan 67. So, we still have those people that are active, but the pay down of that unfunded actuarial liability through the RRP will start to have a very cumulative effect on that unfunded actuarial liability. But if you look at the funding percentages of the plans under Plan 87, they're very high. The police and fire are funded in the mid 80% ranges, low to mid 80% ranges. Even the municipal plan under Plan 87 is funded in the high 60s, close to 70%. That's not even to mention Plan 10, which is at over 90%, and Plan 16, which is projected to have no funding issues because of the type of benefit. So again, it's that legacy issue, the unfunded actuarial liability, that is the main driving force behind that $6 billion.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you all have done a yeoman's job in management, and I welcome any revenue-generating ideas that anyone has that can specifically tackle the legacy costs associated with Plan 67, because when we sort of think of the 300-pound gorilla in the room, that is it for us. But that unfunded liability sometimes overshadows even the greatest successes that we've had in recent years. With that being said, I also want you to tell me, if you will, how many of our employees are actively contributing to Plan 457? And you mentioned the Roth IRA as well. How many are participating?
So the Roth IRA just started yesterday.
Okay.
So there actually have been people who've already signed up for it. It actually went live over the weekend. So people are signing up for that. I don't have those numbers yet. I won't have those for a while. I can get back to you on the numbers of how many people are contributing to Plan 10. However, in the 457 materials, they do mark that as a separate, it's called a 401A account.
401A.
So whenever the employee contributes, we call it a 457 just here. But when an employee makes their own contributions and the employer matches it, it's under 401A. So the assets are growing, and there are more and more people participating in that. In order to ensure that people either in Plan 10 or Plan 16 understand the importance of contributing and enhancing the defined benefit that they have, Nationwide and staff does seminars multiple days a week. Nationwide goes out to the smallest of departments where there might be 5 or 6 people at a remote location, to the airport. They hold luncheons at the Municipal Services Building. They are always out there trying to stress the importance of making your own contributions to enhance the defined benefit as part of that, Plan 16 or Plan 10.
Well, Mr. President, my final question, and thank you for your leeway and comment, is that one of the toughest jobs in this city, and I think for municipalities across the nation, is balancing the retirement security of its workers along with the fiscal health of the city. And I want you, if you will, you commented briefly, but when you think about the plans that were just negotiated via collective bargaining, I'm referring to the stacked hybrid, assuring a defined benefit to, the 60, did we get to 60, Mr. President? I'm so happy we got to 60, Mr. President. So tell me, if you will, how does Philadelphia compare to your knowledge when you think about, again, that delicate balance of the city's fiscal health along with the retirement security of its workforce?
I think it's improving greatly compared to other cities. I think, more importantly, this city is going in the right direction. This city has made changes, even dating back to when Plan 10 was initiated. We were maybe one of the first jurisdictions in the country to have a hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution plan. We are definitely one of the first jurisdictions to have a stacked hybrid plan. People told us it wasn't possible. People in other states, people in other jurisdictions said it wasn't possible. I think that started when Charday was still here, even before Matt. So that started a while. That's been in the works for a while. And let me just give you the projections for the MMO. If the city just made the MMO projection versus the current revenue recognition policy. The actuary projected this, so by 2029 under the MMO, we would have been 76.7% funded. Under the RRP, we're projected to be 83.5% funded.
Wow.
By 2033, under the MMO, we would have been 89.9% funded. Under the RRP, 102.9% funded. The differences between the two are dramatic. Now, whether you get to 102% or not get to 102%, there are variables in that, such as investment return, and I think everyone gets that. However, assuming all things are equal with the assumed rate of return, which is now 7.55, that's a roughly 13% difference in funding percentage just because of the collective bargaining changes and the sales tax provisions. That's exactly what this is. It's nothing else. And so that's the effect that those changes have had, and it's a very positive, forward-looking effect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds-Brown.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you could please allow the professionals on each side of you to ID who they are, what they do, and the team of professionals you brought in the back, because you came in here with a major.
Well, you know why we did that? Because I don't do all the work. We don't do all. We have a good staff who does all the work, and many of which are not here. But so we have Administrator Stacy White sitting here. Next to Stacy is Shahid Lloyd, who runs a unit where people purchase time and get their letters when they're new employees. Dave Fagan, Administrative Assistant.
Okay.
We have the Reverend Tyrone Jordan in the back, who's in our investment staff. Is that Dominique? Yeah, Dominique Cherry right there. We have Bern Buckley, Deputy CIO, Kristen Baer, and Abdel, both from our investment staff. Bill Rubin, who's our Director of Audit, and Jim Kasanis, who is our Chief Compliance Officer.
Okay, and the two to your left and right?
Oh, Christopher DeFusco, our Chief Investment Officer, and Shamika Talaferro, she's the Deputy Executive Director.
Okay, then. Thank you very, very much. My questioning is focused on the song that I sing for all departments whenever you come before me, MBE, WBE participation. And thank you for the great improvement in our fiscal status as has been articulated by Councilwoman Parker. On page 3 of your testimony, you state that in FY18, for professional services contracts, $3.6 million of the 13.9 went towards MWDSBEs. And based on my calculation, that's 26% of the firms. So is that to your satisfaction? Is that, well, here it says, for example, in FY18, 30% of all manager fees went to MWDSBE firms. So are you where you want to be, or provide background?
No, so we are, and those numbers, always our investment fees are on a little bit of a lag, so we're getting them in on a rolling basis. So FY18 is still actually being finalized. It's very strange in the investment world. It takes a while for real estate funds, closed-end real estate funds, private equity funds. It takes them a while to get the actual market return into us.
Very well.
So for FY18, it's actually, the participation fees were almost $5 million, 4.9.
Okay, then. That's
and
a big difference.
That was out of roughly 17, so it's about 28.10%.
Okay, that's a huge difference. Huge difference. And now, the MBE, WBE numbers for public works, services, supplies, and equipment is 25%. However, the participation rate for professional services is 26%. Why?
Well, the professional services are more of our investment managers.
Okay.
And they are, again, they're zero-sum contracts when they're initiated, and we don't know what the amount is until the numbers actually come in, because they're based on a percentage of the assets under management.
And you spoke to in your testimony how you have tackled the issue of diversity and the demographics of your managers. Too often, we hear from departments answers that are not accepted. So why don't you share with us how you all have been intentional in making sure that that mix of managers is diverse?
Our board is not shy,
okay.
As Matt will attest to. So when we bring in an investment manager, even an existing investment manager, one of the questions we always ask them is, tell us about your diversity, but not just strictly your staff diversity. We want to know about the investment professionals.
Thank you.
And also, we want to know what programs you have in place in order to recruit diverse investment professional candidates. I won't use the name of the firm, but we have a local firm that invests with us, and they actually started a program, brought in interns, and actually hired someone full-time within the 9-month period that we asked them about. They didn't have an existing program until they got to the pension board. And because of our questioning, they started a program, they instituted an intern program with local universities, including Channing University, and they brought in interns, and they actually hired someone who was born and raised in North Philadelphia, is an investment professional now working with that firm. So it's very, very important to us, very, very important to the board, and we have seen real results doing that.
Well, that's a great story, and that speaks to how you have to be intentional and strategic, because often it won't happen organically. So tell that story to some of your colleagues across government, that it's possible when it's intentional.
And, well, no, thank you. And Chris and Dominique have spoken at various seminars throughout the country and talked about the program that we have, and other pension funds, other cities, other states are shocked that we have
That it's doable.
such a good, and it is doable, and it's, otherwise you will get lip service, and we're not interested in that.
Amen to that. My last and final question speaks to, my staff and I make it our business to look to see how professionals are being paid across the board, all wrapped up in this term called pay equity. And I want to quote this properly. As of November 2018, there were 56 full-time staffers at the board. Of the 56 full-time staffers, 37 are minority individuals and 19 are non-minorities. So why is it that an average minority full-time staffer salary appears, based on the numbers that we've looked at, is $20,000 less than their non-minority counterparts? And why do we ask that question? Because there's an ask for $559,000 increase in the budget. And so help us understand the need for that, and why those dollars, or maybe those dollars may go towards pay equity.
So the first part of the question I will answer is, if you exclude me from the salary, I think that 20,000 disappears.
Oh.
So I blame the board for that, because that's what they pay me. No, I blame, if you exclude my salary, it's public information. I think
Okay.
my salary skews the results. I think also, for the additional money, is there was a lot of changes in, as far as collective bargaining and
Okay.
increases, and that has to do with it. As far as the overall budget, when we submitted the budget also, the cost for One Philly
Okay.
was, we budgeted that, but then when the cost came in at a later point, it was a little higher than we thought.
Very well.
So,
Well, thank you for that explanation. And so maybe the lesson for us as we look at these docs and actually ask for the information, maybe we should include a line that removes the salary of the lead professional for that office, because it does tilt and tilt the numbers.
it does skew it.
Okay. All right then. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Down.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Councilman.
I have a few questions, not many. It looks like from 2018 to 2020, there's an increase from 56 to 73 positions, 32% increase. According to section 16, page 5, it says budgeted positions for 2020, 73.
So when I came to the board, I think there were budgeted at 79 positions. We've never increased it. We've reduced it. That could have been on a different, I don't know where that number's coming from, but it's been in that low 70s range since I've been there, since
So
I've
the
adjusted.
page is page 5 of section 16 of the
Okay.
budget, the fiscal 2020 operating budget, and it shows that in 18, there were 56 full-time people, and in 2020, where the request is 73.
So, yeah, even last year, there was 55 out of 73.
Yeah, last year you're showing, you still had budgeted 73, but I don't know if you filled those positions.
We filled, I think when you asked this question last year, we said we had a couple vacancies that we were waiting to fill. We did fill those 2 vacancies. So yeah, now it's 56 out of 73 instead of, I think it was 54 last year.
So you have 56 filled right now.
That's right.
So you don't need the 73 budgeted.
Is that a trick question?
Yeah.
So, no, it's, I think as I alluded to last year, I think there's a right size of employees. I don't think it's 56. I think it may be slightly higher than that. I can't be sure yet, but it's not 73.
Okay, that's no problem. And then the other question I have is when you look at the, see, that also skews the whole budget, because when you go back to page 3 of section 16, your personal services in the budget are increasing 13.5% in 2 years. And what I'm not clear on, why the employee benefits in 2 years went from $4,089,000 to almost $5 million, a 24% increase.
Right. So when we submitted the budget last year, we submitted a ratio that turned out to be a little bit less than the benefits, the fringe benefits actually called for. So that was right-sized this year as a percentage, slightly over 1%. Last year, I think we put 0.92, so it skewed the amount, and that's why we went slightly over budget last year. First time ever that we went over budget, and that was because of a percentage that we used that was not correct.
But if we were looking at your budget and said basically, okay, we'll say 60 positions, that would change a lot of these numbers, I think, to a degree.
Oh, sure. With 13
Okay.
positions would have a big effect.
Let me ask you just general questions. There's 66,000 people right now, I think, in the pension program?
Yes, roughly 66, that's right.
66. And is there 29,000 employees
Slightly under 29, that's right.
and roughly 37,000 currently receiving payments?
That's right.
And I know my colleague, Councilwoman Parker, talked about the underfunded liability. Is it still $6 billion or is it less than $6 billion?
Right around $6 billion, that's right.
$6 billion. And then in the fund right now, how much are we investing? Is it 4.5 to 5 billion? What is that number?
So we're investing all but a certain percent, and Chris could talk about that.
So, as of the end of February, which is when we have the most, the official report that's on the website, we had just over $5 billion in the fund. Invested, with the exception of we do keep a certain amount of cash in reserve. So we had about 1.2% in cash at the end of February. All the rest of the $5 billion in change is actively invested.
So would you say, just broad strokes, that 3.8 billion is invested and 1.2 is roughly liquid?
No, I may have not been clear. Only 1.2% is in cash. So
percent.
98.8, I may have not been clear. 98.8% roughly at the end of February was invested, 1.2% in cash.
And that 5 billion is earning about 7.5%?
So last fiscal year, it earned 9%. The year before that, right around 13%.
So maybe you can explain this to me. I saw in the paperwork the board's returns for fiscal year 2018 were at 9.01%. But it said the returns for the calendar year 2018 were negative 4.2 net of fees.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the difference?
Sure. So the fiscal year, obviously ended on June 30th of 2018. You may recall the months of October and then December of 2018 were extremely rough on the markets, particularly in October when somewhat unusually both bonds and stocks in terms of their value dropped at the same time. They're not normally as correlated as they were in that month. What I will say is while we don't like losing money over any period, it is inevitable when you're invested. And if you look at some of the other plans that Fran alluded to earlier, CSRS lost slightly more than that, about 10 basis points more. Bucks County lost about 50 basis points more. Chester, almost 6%. Delco lost almost 7%. Monco County, that's often touted because, the Vanguard, 90% passively managed, they lost 5.5%. So
What are you projecting for 19 as a return for the city?
So I'm not in the business of prognosticating. I can't tell you what the markets are going to do, today as 3 months from now. What I can tell you is that, for the first 3 months, so the estimated numbers for the calendar year through March 31st are just under 8%. For the fiscal year, they're at around 1.6%. And for the month of March, we made about 90 basis points, just under 1%.
So the fiscal year from July 1 of 18 through, let's say, March 31 of 19, it's
We're
1.6. 1.6.
Correct.
So unless we have a big pickup in the next 3 months, we're going to be behind.
Right. Although, again, when you look at, we have to consider that, again, we're investing, as you know, over the long term. You're going to have years where you drastically overperform, as we did 2 years ago. You're going to have years where you come in behind. The idea is to have steady, stable performance that over 10, 20, 30-year cycles gets you at or above the assumed rate of return.
That's another question? Okay. Another question I just wanted to ask you. We're paying out right now how much per year? Like 1.1 billion, or roughly what are we paying out?
Tell you, so in the standard benefits, the annual rate of benefits, this is through February 28th, 2019, is $771.9 million that were paid out. That doesn't include drop payments and withdrawal of contributions.
Give me the total. Give me the total of everything that is taxed onto the pension.
That gets us into the $800 million, mid
$800 million.
$800 million.
So in simple terms, we're paying out $800 million.
That's right.
We're contributing, and this administration and this council has been pretty aggressive in the last 4 years in raising the contribution, because it's right now like 15% of the new budget,
Right.
$746 million. So we're contributing 746, we're paying out 800. Then the interest on our investments, is that like $350 million, $375 million?
So for the last fiscal year, for fiscal year 18, the amount that we gained from investment returns was just under $464 million.
464. So that's where we're chipping away at that liability, basically.
Correct.
So what we need some of those interest payments to make up the outflow. So we're not really at our contribution is not equaling the total outflow, but the interest on the investments is helping us make up for the difference.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I think you guys are doing a good job. I just want to make sure we stay on track. And also, I always like to plan for the worst and hope for the best, and I do think we will see a recession in the next few years, so just want to make sure we're on top of that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. That appears to be the end of the questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
There being none, their committee will stand in recess until Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019 at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in room 400 City Hall. Thank you very much.